They all said our marriage was cursed, but I didn't listen until it was too late. My parents, my friends, even the old ladies in our neighborhood who knew every bit of local gossip. They whispered about bad omens, about a shadow hanging over us. But I was Michael Hayes, 34, and I was in love with Sarah, 33, a love so fierce it drowned out all the warnings. I scoffed at their superstitions, clung to my belief in logic, in rational explanations. I didn't listen until it was too late. It started subtly, even before the wedding. My mother, Eleanor, 60, a devout woman who believed deeply in omens, had voiced her concerns first. Sarah and I had chosen an old, abandoned chapel on the outskirts of town for our ceremony. It was beautiful, overgrown with ivy, giving it a gothic, romantic feel. But the locals called it the Forsaken Chapel, whispered tales of ill-fated unions performed there decades ago. It's not right, Michael, my mother had pleaded. There's a reason it's abandoned. It carries bad luck. I laughed it off. It was just an old building. Then, at our engagement party, a small, intimate gathering at my sister Chloe's, 31, place, a storm blew in from nowhere. A sudden, violent gust of wind ripped through the open window, sending a framed photo of Sarah and me crashing to the floor. The glass shattered, cutting Sarah's hand slightly. A bad sign, my aunt, Martha, 65, had murmured, quickly dabbing at Sarah's finger with a napkin. Broken glass on such a happy occasion, I rolled my eyes. Just a coincidence. Bad weather. Sarah, though, seemed a little shaken by it. She was usually so strong, so unbothered by minor mishaps. But she grew quiet that night, her smile a bit more subdued. I put it down to pre-wedding jitters. My best friend, David Chen, 34, always the pragmatist, had even made a joke. Looks like you two are starting with a bang, literally. Maybe it's a sign to just elope to Vegas. We laughed, but the joke felt a little hollow. The wedding day itself was a kaleidoscope of small, unsettling incidents. We woke up to a thick, unnatural fog, even though it was midsummer. The kind of fog that clings to everything, making the familiar unfamiliar. It enveloped the old chapel, lending it an eerie, almost ghostly atmosphere. It's kind of romantic, right? Sarah had said, trying to sound positive, but her voice held a tremor I hadn't heard before. Then, as Sarah was getting ready, her veil, which had been perfectly placed, suddenly caught fire. A tiny spark from a loose wire in an old lamp, the hotel staff later explained. Quickly extinguished, no real harm done. But the veil was ruined, a black scorch mark marring the delicate lace. My mother, who was with Sarah, nearly fainted. It's cursed, Michael, I told you, a fire on your wedding day. Her voice was laced with frantic desperation. I rushed to the hotel, trying to calm everyone down. It was just an old lamp. Accidents happen. I insisted. We found a spare veil, not as beautiful, but it would do. Sarah, though, looked utterly drained. Her eyes, usually sparkling, seemed dull, shadowed. As I waited at the altar in the dimly lit chapel, a raven, a huge, black bird, flew into the open doorway, circled once, and then perched on the top of the old wooden cross above the altar, staring down at us with beady, intelligent eyes. It stayed there throughout the entire ceremony, a silent, ominous sentinel. I tried to ignore it, focusing on Sarah as she walked down the aisle. My groomsmen, Tom and Liam, both 34, kept glancing up, clearly unnerved. The guests whispered amongst themselves. And then, just as Pastor Thomas, 60, was about to pronounce as husband and wife, a deafening crack of thunder shook the chapel, and torrential rain began to pour down, drumming against the old roof with a violent intensity that drowned out his words. The chapel's ancient stained glass window, depicting a serene religious scene, developed a hairline crack, right through the face of an angel. Still, we persevered. We exchanged our vows, kissed, and walked out into a world suddenly drenched and obscured by mist. Married life will be an adventure, at least, I joked, trying to lighten the mood. But the smiles were strained. Even then, the whispers of, cursed, followed us like the lingering fog. The first year of our marriage was a series of unfortunate events. Small things, at first, then escalating. Our car, a perfectly reliable sedan, kept breaking down in the most inconvenient places. My business, which had been steadily growing, hit a rough patch. Clients canceled, projects fell through. Sarah lost her job at a prestigious architecture firm after a major project went unexpectedly wrong. We drained our savings, struggling to make ends meet. Our house, the one with the big garden, seemed to develop a mind of its own. Lights flickered constantly. Appliances malfunctioned. Our beloved golden retriever, Max, who had been a picture of health, suddenly fell ill and died within weeks, leaving us heartbroken. We fought more. The stress, the constant setbacks, frayed our nerves. Sarah grew withdrawn, her vibrant energy replaced by quiet resignation. She started having nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, sometimes whispering about shadows, about being watched. She'd wake me up, terrified, but she could never quite remember the details. My mother continued to call, pleading with us. It's the curse, Michael. You have to break it. Go to a priest, a spiritual healer. I dismissed her, angry that she would blame our misfortunes on something so irrational. I looked for logical explanations. Economic downturns, faulty wiring, unfortunate accidents. But the sheer number of things going wrong, the constant barrage of bad luck, chipped away at my rational facade. The second year was worse. Our health started to decline. Sarah developed a mysterious chronic fatigue that doctors couldn't diagnose. She was constantly tired, her body aching. I started getting debilitating migraines that would leave me incapacitated for days. Our once active lives were replaced by exhaustion and pain. The whispers Sarah heard in her dreams seemed to bleed into our waking life. Sometimes, I would hear them too. Faint, almost imperceptible sounds, like a low murmur just at the edge of hearing. Or a fleeting shadow in my peripheral vision, gone as soon as I turned my head. It made the house feel cold, despite the warmth of summer. One morning, I found all our wedding photos, neatly arranged in their frames, turned face down on the mantelpiece. Sarah swore she hadn't touched them. Another time, the framed certificate from our wedding, which had been hanging securely on the wall, was found lying on the floor, the glass shattered. It wasn't a fall, it looked like it had been violently thrown. Sarah was now convinced. It's the chapel, Michael, she'd whisper, her eyes wide with fear. It's following us, it's the curse. I still fought it, still tried to find logic. A draft, an old nail, but deep down, a cold dread was starting to settle in my bones. We decided to move, to leave the house, the city, everything connected to our cursed beginning. We found a small apartment in a new state, a fresh start, hundreds of miles away. Maybe distance would break the pattern. The new apartment felt normal. For a few weeks, we started to breathe easier. Sarah seemed to regain some of her energy. My migraines lessened. Hope, fragile but real, began to bloom. But it didn't last. The day we were unpacking our last box, Sarah opened it and screamed. Inside, carefully placed on top of our clothes, was a single, charred feather. A raven's feather, and a small, burnt piece of delicate lace. A piece of her original wedding veil. The color drained from Sarah's face. Her eyes were filled with pure terror. She knew, we both knew, it hadn't been left behind. It had followed us. The minor accidents started again. Keys vanishing, then reappearing in odd places. Lights flickering. My new job, which had started promisingly, began to falter, projects mysteriously delayed or cancelled. Sarah's fatigue returned, even worse than before. The whispers in the apartment grew louder, more distinct. They sounded like a chorus of low, murmuring voices, just beyond comprehension. And the shadows, they were no longer fleeting. Sometimes, when I glanced quickly, I'd see a dark, indistinct shape at the edge of a doorway, or reflected in a window. It never lingered, but it was there. It felt like something was watching us. Sarah began to waste away. She stopped eating, sleeping. Her beautiful, vibrant self was fading, replaced by a pale, gaunt figure consumed by terror. She would spend hours just staring at the wall, her eyes wide and vacant. She often talked about it, about the shadow, about the dark presence. She was losing her mind. And I was helpless. I tried everything. Doctors, therapists, even, in my desperation, a local priest. The doctors said it was depression, severe anxiety, maybe a nervous breakdown. The therapist tried to get her to talk, but Sarah would just stare blankly or start sobbing uncontrollably. The priest, after listening to my fragmented, hesitant story, looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern. He spoke about faith, about light conquering darkness, but I knew, in my heart, that this was beyond simple prayer. One night, Sarah woke me up, her eyes blazing with a clarity I hadn't seen in months, but also a profound, chilling despair. It wants me, Michael, she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's always wanted me, from the chapel, from the moment we said, I do. I held her tight, trying to soothe her, trying to tell her it wasn't real. But then, as I held her, I felt a sudden, intense coldness emanating from her. A deep, unnatural chill that seemed to seep into my very bones. Her body stiffened, her eyes rolled back, and then, she went limp. I rushed her to the hospital. Too late. The doctors said it was a massive heart attack. A sudden, unexplained cardiac arrest. But I knew it wasn't just a heart attack. It was the curse. It had taken her. Her funeral was simple, small. My parents were there, broken. Chloe cried silent tears. David was a pillar of strength. Everyone mourned the loss of a beautiful, vibrant woman, taken too soon. But they didn't know the real story. They didn't know about the whispers, the shadows, the raven, the burnt veil. They didn't know about the curse. I sold the new apartment. I couldn't bear to be there. I couldn't bear the thought of the whispers still lurking in the corners, the shadows still dancing at the edges of my vision. I moved back to my old city, into a small, sterile apartment that felt utterly devoid of life, devoid of Sarah. The whispers, they still follow me. Faint, almost imperceptible. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear a soft, rustling sound, like wings. Or a faint, melodious hum, just beyond my understanding. The shadows still flicker. I see them sometimes, out of the corner of my eye. A fleeting darkness that seems to move with purpose. I never married again. I couldn't. How could I bring anyone else into a life that was still, undeniably, shadowed by that curse? I refused to let anyone else be touched by the darkness that took Sarah. They all said our marriage was cursed. And I, in my youthful arrogance, in my belief in logic, in my love for Sarah, didn't listen. I didn't listen until it was too late. Until the curse, the shadow, whatever it was, took her from me. And now, I live in the echoes of their warnings, forever haunted by the love I lost and the supernatural dread that claimed her. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, or the shadows lengthen in the twilight, I can almost hear her whispering my name, just beyond the veil.